So I'm back today to discuss or have a conversation on the changing manufacturing processes that are impacting our zeitgeist. This is the last video of round two. So I do wish to thank Young Moon again for putting this together and on staying on top of me to get this done, because he was convinced that this is going to help our goals of having a dialogue on the emerging scenarios in the lighting design field. So, moving to the conversation itself, which is on the manufacturing processes, a quick history lesson. Before the first industrial revolution, we were making things by hand in small orders. You would have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 pieces at one time. Then the assembly line came, the industrial revolution came, and we started making products by the thousands. And each one of the products looked the same. The cars came in with the assembly line, the factories were making products, putting it together in the thousands. So when the lighting design field in the 60s and the 70s started making light fixtures, they were following the same industry standards, which is that they were going to make thousands of it. And you couldn't really make modifications to them. If you did want to make modifications, then the lead time connected with the fixtures was tremendous, because the prototyping and the manufacturing would take that much longer. Then we come into the 90s and the early 2000s with the advent of 3D printing, stereolithography, and how the fixtures were being made. Over the last 10 years specifically, the manufacturing processes for making light fixtures has changed completely. So in the 90s, when I started as a lighting designer working in Boston, we would write catalog numbers that were 2 lines long, because there were so many aspects to the fixture. You know, this kind of ballast, this kind of finish, this kind of voltage, this kind of, reflector, this kind of cutoff angle. The list was endless. Literally, we would have like 2 long lines of just catalog number. Fast forward 20 years, and we're in the 2010s, and the whole industry is now standardized to not having those many options, a much shorter lead time, and manufacturing processes that can make fixtures for small orders. So this is kind of going back to when we first started manufacturing items in factories or at workshops, is that we could make like 5 or 6 or 10 of them. So we're back to that, because now we have processes where you are able to make small orders without impacting the lead times. You're not making it in thousands and thousands. Then as LEDs became more mainstream, the other occurrence was that LEDs started dumbing everything down in terms of distribution and fixture requirements. And dumbing may be a strong word, but they just basically got it down to the lowest common multiple. All the fixtures started looking the same. Yeah, you can make distributions different, etc., but there was a huge standardization of mass-produced light fixtures. Bespoken light fixtures, yes, you could still make those modifications, etc., but mass-produced light fixtures, there was a commoditization of lights across the board. So now, what you have is not that much variety, but a great amount of standardization, a great amount of efficiency. What's the downside of it? Every space is going to start looking very, very, very similar. The lighting moves that people in my community or otherwise who practice lighting or use lighting, the lighting moves are going to be down to a very limited palette. And the idea of using lights for a deeper content by utilizing the architecture will most likely be replaced by using the technology to cover up or obfuscate the issue of that we're losing variety and we are losing the different little things that made it nice and flavorful to a standard response, doesn't matter where you are. Because the LED lighting systems only come in certain forms and shapes. But wait, you can change the forms and shapes. I'm talking about the mass-produced markets. In the custom market, in the bespoken market, you can do whatever you want, budget and costs, budget and time permitting. But if you look at the world at large, what's happening is that the visual field, with the manufacturing processes being more and more standardized, the visual field is becoming kind of monotonous. Because you're not going to get that many options available to you from a manufacturing processes standpoint, for the most part, right? So how does that impact us? Everything is getting standardized. Technologies are fairly standard. 90% of the world lighting market now is LEDs. So the interesting conversation here is when people say that, oh my God, what are we going to do now? I give them the example of the typewriter. That when the typewriter, you remember the clunk, 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 so when the typewriters got replaced by the DOS-based computer systems and the dot matrix printers, right? It didn't mean that we forgot how to write. It was just a different technology. And that's kind of the criticality in our level of understanding here, is that it's a new world. There are many, many new situations in front of us, and the change is the only constant. I keep saying that it will keep evolving. But what we need to do is keep questioning what we have in front of us so that we evolve with the zeitgeist and stay relevant. How we change our design approach and philosophy and how we specify or conceptualize a space, that's what needs to be examined. That's the point I'm trying to make. That the time has come for us to examine what we have in front of us and say, all right, it's not really a halogen light anymore, so how do I change my response? As against kind of going, oh God, I really wanted that halogen, I don't have it, I don't even know what to do now. No, really, let's start analyzing, let's start coming up with new ideas, new solutions, let's adapt and let's move forward. It's a criticality to providing good service to our clients. We've had this conversation with several people who, when the halogen was banned in Europe, we're going to lose the sparkle, we're going to lose the whole candle idea, etc., etc. And in parts I agreed, but in many parts I kind of looked at it as this is the sign of the times, and we need to keep adapting and keep, growing the field in front of us. One of my favorite other examples is when the manufacturers would come to us 5 years ago, when they had just really woken up to all the beauties and amazing characteristics of LEDs for mass production. They would come to us with, maybe 7 years ago, they would come to us with examples of how they would use these lights in existing 2x2 or and retrofit options for 2x2 troffers or 2x4 troffers. And what I found really amusing is that what they were doing is they were rolling up the LEDs, like they were rolling up a joint, and putting it into the same form factor light fixture that we have had since the 60s. And in that we're losing the plot, because the manufacturing processes are giving us, for the first time in the history of humanity, we are getting planar light sources. Planar light sources being that now I can have a light source which is like a sheet of paper and not a point source. Humanity has grown up with point sources. The sun, the moon, the candle, the fire, and so on and so forth. Right? Now we're coming to a point where I could get a sheet of light that will emanate light if I mount it on the wall. How's that going to render my architecture? Even the renderings that were being done, those beautiful renderings done by Francis Ching in the 60s and the 70s, will they look the same? Representation by artists, will it look the same? Because technology is changing. The processes are changing. So if I'm getting a sheet of light, how does that render my space? And what impact does it have on the material choice, on the color choice, and our perceptions? That's what the manufacturing processes are doing. And the point I'm trying to make is that we need to factor that in, because it's kind of fait accompli. It's kind of where we're going. So how do we utilize it and become winners in the visual environment, as against fighting it and saying, I miss the days of the halogen, when you could have 2 martinis for lunch and smoke in restaurants. Oh, those were the days. Well, guess what? That's not the case anymore, and we need to adapt, and we need to come up with new solutions for our zeitgeist. So thank you again for listening. This concludes our round 2 of videos. I don't know if I'll be back for round 3. Who knows? But thank you for listening again. And do write to us, New York at awalightingdesigners.com, or visit our website, contextualizinglight.com. Thank you.